Before his passing, Paul Newman, Hollywood's golden boy with the piercing blue eyes and an unshakable sense of grace, carried with him a secret that very few ever knew. Behind the charm, the effortless cool, and the quiet philanthropy that made him a legend, there was another side of Newman, a man who kept score. And when the years began to catch up to him, as reflection replaced ambition, he did something no one expected from such a measured, diplomatic man. He made a list. It wasn't a list of favorite roles or beloved memories, but of something far more human. 7 names. 7 people who, despite the glamour of the industry, had tested his patience, bruised his ideals, or simply left a sour taste in his otherwise stellar career. For decades, that list remained buried, whispered only among the closest members of his circle. But as time passed, interviews surfaced, friends spoke candidly, and at last, the curtain was pulled back on the one thing Paul Newman had never performed for the cameras. His honest opinions that if this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. So today, we'll step into that hidden world to uncover why one of Hollywood's most respected figures kept a list of the actors he couldn't stand, what it reveals about him as a man, and why even his harsh judgments came from a place of principle. Because this story isn't just about grudges. It's about the standards of a man who demanded excellence even when others did not. To the world, Paul Newman was everything a Hollywood star should be: charismatic, talented, and disarmingly kind. His performances, from Cool Hand Luke to The Hustler, defined masculinity for a generation. Off-screen, his philanthropic efforts were legendary. His Newman's own food brand alone donated over $500 million to charity. But those closest to him knew that beneath the effortless charm was a perfectionist with a long fuse, and a clear line you did not cross. Martin Ritt, the director who had known Newman since the early days, once said, "Paul didn't lose his temper easily, but when he did, that was it. You were done." That statement, simple but sharp, captures the essence of Newman's standards. He didn't hate easily, but when someone broke that silent contract of professionalism and integrity, they never made their way back into his good graces. So, who were the 7 people who found themselves on the wrong side of Paul Newman's patience? And what could have driven this famously private man to such strong feelings? Let's start from the bottom of the list and climb our way to number 1. Number 7, Tom Cruise, the protege who pushed too hard. In 1986, Paul Newman finally won his long-overdue Oscar for The Color of Money, directed by Martin Scorsese. His co-star in that film was a rising young actor named Tom Cruise, a ball of energy and ambition. To the public, it looked like a perfect match, the veteran legend passing the torch to the next generation's leading man. Behind the scenes, though, it was a different story. Paul found Tom's intensity exhausting, recalled producer Richard Zanuck. He respected the kid's drive, but the constant enthusiasm, the bouncing energy, it was too much. Newman valued calm, control, and preparation. Cruise, on the other hand, radiated restless energy, always pushing, always talking. What truly irritated Newman, according to those close to the production, was Cruise's obsession with self-promotion during press tours. While Newman preferred to let the work speak for itself, Cruise was already mastering the art of building the Tom Cruise brand. Scorsese later laughed about it, remembering Newman telling him after a press junket, "If that kid says how much he learned from me one more time while interrupting me to talk about his workout routine, I might throw him out a window." It was a dry joke, but it carried a sting of truth. Newman admired focus. Cruise's whirlwind of energy, however genuine, simply didn't fit his idea of professionalism. Number 6, Charlton Heston, the ideological divide. Newman's 6th entry on the list was less about behavior and more about belief. Charlton Heston, towering, proud, and politically conservative, represented everything Newman distrusted about the misuse of fame. The 2 men never worked together, yet their names clashed constantly in Hollywood's political circles of the 1960s and 70s. As Newman grew more outspoken in his liberal activism, Heston became the public face of conservative Hollywood, eventually serving as president of the NRA. Joan Woodward Newman's wife later said, "Paul couldn't reconcile the man who played Moses with the man who gave those speeches. Their divide wasn't personal, it was philosophical." Newman believed fame came with responsibility to use one's influence for compassion and progress, not division. During a 1966 campaign event, both actors found themselves in the same restaurant supporting opposing political candidates. Witnesses say Newman refused to even acknowledge Heston. Years later, he would reflect on it with trademark restraint. "Some people confuse having played great men with being great men." It was a simple line, but it carried the weight of deep disapproval. Number 5, Frank Sinatra, the disrespectful collaborator. By the 1980s, Newman had been working in film for over 3 decades. He had earned the respect of his peers through discipline, punctuality, and quiet mastery. So, when he worked with Frank Sinatra on the 1980 disaster film, When Time Ran Out, he expected the same from everyone else. What he got instead was chaos. Sinatra, for all his charisma, was known for showing up late doing a take or two and calling it a day. Newman found that behavior infuriating. "Paul couldn't stand how Frank would treat the set like a casual gig," said director James Goldstone. To Paul, that was disrespectful to everyone there. When Sinatra arrived hours late one day, Newman, ever the gentleman, pulled him aside and told him calmly that others had been waiting. Sinatra reportedly didn't take it well. Years later, when asked about Sinatra, Newman's reply was diplomatic but sharp. "Frank has a lovely singing voice." That was Paul's version of an insult, a soft-spoken dagger. Number 4, Marlon Brando, the wasted genius. Few names in Hollywood carried as much weight as Marlon Brando's. And yet, for Newman, Brando represented something almost tragic. They never worked together, but Newman often found himself compared to Brando. Both were method-trained, both brooding, both magnetic. But while Newman channeled his talent with precision, Brando often seemed to throw his away. Robert Redford once recalled Newman saying, "Watching Brando later in his life was like watching someone burn a Picasso for heat." To Paul, Brando had been given a gift that demanded care, and instead he treated it like a burden. The wasted potential bothered him more than arrogance ever could. Eva Marie Saint, Newman's co-star in Exodus, put it best, "Paul believed you owed your best to everyone on set." Hearing stories about Brando showing up unprepared offended his sense of discipline. Newman saw acting as a craft, not a stage for ego, and Brando, in his later years, embodied everything Newman couldn't tolerate: brilliance without responsibility. Number 3, Steve McQueen, the competitive equal. If Brando represented squandered talent, Steve McQueen symbolized something else entirely: rivalry. Both men were icons of cool. Both defined the era's masculine ideal. But when they finally worked together on The Towering Inferno in 1974, egos collided like fire and steel. McQueen insisted on perfect parity. Same pay, same number of lines, even the same number of steps to climb in the burning building scenes. He demanded that his name appear no lower than Newman's in the credits, resulting in a bizarre shared billing design. Paul found it exhausting, said director John Gilliman. Off-camera, they were supposed to play heroes saving lives, but off-set, Steve was counting who got the better close-up. Newman handled it with restraint, later saying, "Some actors see every film as a competition. I've always seen it as a collaboration." That quiet sentence spoke volumes. Newman didn't hate McQueen the man. He hated what McQueen represented: ego winning over art. Number 2, John Wayne, the cultural opposite. Newman and John Wayne never shared the screen, but they shared something far more intense: a political battlefield. Wayne, the rugged patriot, was the public face of conservative America, while Newman, ever the activist, fought for civil rights and peace. During the Vietnam War, their ideological clash reached a boiling point. Wayne publicly praised the war effort. Newman called it immoral. Arthur Penn, a filmmaker friend, remembered, "Paul thought Wayne's Green Berets movie was dangerous propaganda." Meanwhile, Wayne accused people like Paul of being unpatriotic. Their mutual disdain became an unspoken Hollywood rift. But even here, Newman's criticism came from thought, not malice. He once told a journalist, "I admire Wayne's success, but he plays John Wayne in every movie. I try to play someone new each time." After Wayne's death, Newman softened, saying, "He was an American institution." Sometimes institutions make you uncomfortable, but that doesn't make them less significant. It was the closest thing to peace either man ever offered. Number 1, Robert Redford, the friend who tested his patience. And now, the shocker, number 1. The man Paul Newman reportedly found the most infuriating wasn't an enemy, it was his friend, Robert Redford. Their chemistry on screen in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and The Sting remains one of cinema's greatest partnerships. Off-screen, though, their differences were legendary. Redford was notoriously late. Newman, by contrast, treated punctuality like a religion. Director George Roy Hill recalled, "Paul would be on set at dawn, prepped and ready. We'd wait hours for Bob. It drove him insane." Once, the crew even gifted Newman a clock with Redford's face. On every number, it was always Redford o'clock. Newman laughed, but the irritation lingered. Ironically, Redford's talent made the situation worse. Newman once joked, "The worst thing about Redford is that he can show up 3 hours late and still nail it in one take." They were opposites in every sense, structured versus spontaneous, but together they created magic. Redford later admitted, "We got under each other's skin, but that's what made it work." Newman summed it up best, "Working with Robert taught me patience. I had none before." When the list surfaced through interviews after Newman's death in 2008, it wasn't the scandal people expected. His daughter Melissa explained it best, "Dad's list wasn't about grudges. It was about values." For Newman, acting wasn't just pretending, it was a promise. To his audience, to his crew, and to the craft itself. Those who broke that promise, whether through ego, laziness, or arrogance, earned a quiet place on his mental blacklist. A. E. Hotchner, Newman's longtime friend, recalled their late-night talks as Paul battled cancer. He wasn't bitter. He was reflecting. The list was his way of being honest, with himself more than anyone. It wasn't for the public. It was private accountability, his confession of where disappointment met principle. Even those who found themselves on it, like Redford, responded with humor and respect. When told about his top spot, Redford laughed, "I'm honored to have irritated him that much. Paul never suffered fools, and if he still worked with me despite it all, that's the best compliment I could get."